Strategy implementation and control. In this chapter, we will discuss interrelations between strategy formulation and implementation, issues in strategy implementation, organization and strategy implementation, strategic business units and core competence, leadership and strategic implementation, strategic change, strategic control, and building a strategy-supportive corporate culture. Interrelations between strategy formulation and implementation. Strategy implementation concerns the managerial exercise of putting a freshly chosen strategy into place. It is concerned with translating a decision into action, which presupposes that the decision itself was made with some thought being given to feasibility and acceptability. It needs to be emphasized that strategy is not synonymous with long-term plan, but rather consists of an enterprise's attempts to reach some preferred future state by adapting its competitive position as circumstances change. While a series of strategic moves may be planned, competitors' actions will mean that the actual moves will have to be modified to take account of those actions. The basic elements of strategic management are given here. Organizational success is a function of good strategy and proper implementation. The matrix in the figure below represents various combinations of strategy formulation and implementation. The figure shows the distinction between sound or flawed strategy formulation and excellent or weak strategy implementation. Square A is the situation where a company apparently has formulated a very competitive strategy but is showing difficulties in implementing it successfully. This can be due to various factors such as the lack of experience, for example startups, the lack of resources, missing leadership, and so on. In such a situation, the company will aim at moving from square A to square B given they realize their implementation difficulties. Square B is the ideal situation where a company has succeeded in designing a sound and competitive strategy and has been successful in implementing it. Square C is reserved for companies that haven't succeeded in coming up with a sound strategy formulation and in addition are bad at implementing their flawed strategic model. Their path to success also goes through business model redesign and implementation or execution readjustment. Square D is the situation where the strategy formulation is flawed but the company is showing excellent implementation skills. When a company finds itself in Square D, the first thing they have to do is to redesign their strategy before readjusting their implementation or execution skills. In contrast to this view of strategy, there is another approach to management practice, which has been common in many organizations. Let us first understand the two terms. Efficiency. It is the extent to which time, effort, or cost is well used for the intended task or function. It often comprises specifically the capability of a specific application of effort to produce a specific outcome effectively with a minimum amount or quantity of waste, expense, or unnecessary effort. Effectiveness. It is the capability of producing a desired result. When something is deemed effective, it means it has an intended or expected outcome. In crude terms, to be effective is to do the right thing, while to be efficient is to do the thing right. An emphasis on efficiency rather than on effectiveness is clearly wrong. An organization that finds itself in cell 1 is well placed and thrives since it is achieving what it aspires to achieve with an efficient output-input ratio. In contrast, an organization in cell 2 or 4 is doomed unless it can establish some strategic direction. The particular point to note is that cell 2 is a worse place to be in than cell 3 is, since in the latter the strategic direction is present to ensure effectiveness even if rather too much input is being used to generate outputs. To be effective is to survive, whereas to be efficient is not in itself either necessary or sufficient for survival. strategic formulation and strategic implementation. Although linked, strategy implementation is fundamentally different from strategy formulation. Strategy formulation and implementation can be contrasted in the following ways. Kindly have a look at the table. Please stop the video. You have 5 seconds to do so. Linkages. Two types of linkages exist between these two phases of strategic management. The forward linkages deal with the impact of formulation on implementation, while the backward linkages are concerned with the impact in the opposite direction. Forward linkages. The different elements in strategy formulation, starting with objective setting through environmental and organizational appraisal, strategic alternatives, and choice to the strategic plan, determine the course that an organization adopts for itself. With the formulation of new strategies or reformulation of existing strategies, many changes have to be effected within the organization. For instance, the organizational structure has to undergo a change in the light of the requirements of the modified or new strategy. The style of leadership has to be adapted to the needs of the modified or new strategies. In this way, the formulation of strategies has forward linkages with their implementation. Backward linkages. Just as implementation is determined by the formulation of strategies, the formulation process is also affected by factors related with implementation. While dealing with strategic choice, remember that past strategic actions also determine the choice of strategy. Organizations tend to adopt those strategies which can be implemented with the help of the present structure of resources, combined with some additional efforts. Such incremental changes over a period of time take the organization from where it is to where it wishes to be. Strategy implementation. The strategic plan is a statement of intent. Implementation tasks are meant to realize the intent. Strategies, therefore, have to be activated through implementation. Strategies should lead to plans. For instance, if stability strategies have been formulated, they may lead to the formulation of various plans. One such plan could be modernization plan. Plans result in different kinds of programs. An example of a program is a research and development program for the development of a new product. Programs lead to the formulation of projects. A project is a highly specific program for which the time schedule and costs are predetermined. It requires allocation of funds based on capital budgeting by organizations. Projects create the needed infrastructure for day-to-day operations in an organization. They may be used for setting up new or additional plants, modernizing the existing facilities, and for other activities required for the implementation of strategies. Strategy should be implemented in the following sequence: project implementation, procedural implementation, resource allocation, structural implementation, functional implementation, and behavioral implementation. Please note that the sequence does not mean that each of the following activities are necessarily performed one after another. Several activities can be performed simultaneously. Certain other activities may have to be repeated over time, and many may be performed only once. In all but the smallest organizations, the transition from strategy formulation to strategy implementation requires a shift in responsibility from strategists to divisional and functional managers. Implementation problems may arise because of this shift in responsibility, especially in cases where strategy formulation decisions come as a surprise to the middle and lower level managers. It has been observed that managers and employees are motivated more by perceived self-interests than by organizational interests, unless the two coincide. Therefore, it is essential that divisional and functional managers be involved in strategy formulation activities. Of equal importance, strategists should be involved as much as possible in strategy implementation activities. Management issues central to strategy implementation include establishing annual objectives, devising policies, allocating resources, altering an existing organizational structure, restructuring and re-engineering, revising reward and incentive plans, minimizing resistance to change, matching managers with strategy, developing a strategy supportive culture, adapting production or operations processes, and developing an effective human resource. Management changes are necessarily more extensive when strategies to be implemented move a firm in major new direction. Managers and employees throughout an organization should participate early and directly in strategy implementation decisions. Their role in strategy implementation should build upon prior involvement in strategy formulation activities. Also, rationale for objectives and strategies should be understood clearly communicated throughout an organization. Major competitors' accomplishments, products, plans, actions, and performance should be apparent to all organizational members. Major external opportunities and threats should be clear, and managers' and employees' questions should be answered. Top-down flow of communication is essential for developing bottom-up support. Firms need to develop a competitor focus at all hierarchical levels by gathering and widely distributing competitive intelligence. Employees should be able to benchmark their efforts against best-in-class competitors. This is a challenge for strategists of the firm. Firms should provide training for both managers and employees to ensure that they have and maintain the necessary skills. Organization and strategy implementation. Changes in strategy lead to changes in organizational structure. Structure should be designed to facilitate the strategic pursuit of a firm and therefore follow strategy. Two major reasons for the same are: structure largely dictates how objectives and policies will be established. For example, objectives and policies established under a geographic organizational structure are couched in geographic terms. The structural format for developing objectives and policies can significantly impact all other strategy implementation activities. Structure dictates how resources will be allocated. If an organization structure is based on customer groups, then resources will be allocated in that manner. Similarly, if an organization structure is set up along functional business lines, then resources are allocated by functional areas. Small firms tend to be functionally structured, that is, centralized. Medium-sized firms tend to be divisionally structured, decentralized. Large firms tend to use an SBU, strategic business unit, or matrix structure. As organizations grow, their structures generally change from simple to complex as a result of linking together of several basic strategies. Chandler found a particular structure sequence to be often repeated as organizations grow and change strategy over time. Now we will examine the basic types of organizational structure: functional, divisional, strategic business unit, matrix, network, and hourglass structures. Functional structure. A functional structure groups tasks and activities by business function, such as production or operations, marketing, finance or accounting, research and development, and management information systems. Besides being simple and inexpensive, a functional structure also promotes specialization of labor, encourages efficiency, minimizes the need for an elaborate control system, and allows rapid decision making. Disadvantages of a functional structure are that it forces accountability to the top, minimizes career development opportunities, and is sometimes characterized by low employee morale, staff conflicts, poor delegation of authority, and inadequate planning for products and markets. Most large companies abandoned the functional structure in favor of decentralization and improved accountability. Divisional structure. As a small organization grows, it has more difficulty in managing different products and services in different markets. Some form of divisional structure generally becomes necessary to motivate employees, control operations, and compete successfully in diverse locations. The divisional structure can be organized in one of the four ways: geographic area, product or service, customer, or by process. Geographic area. A divisional structure by geographic area is appropriate for organizations whose strategies need to be tailored to fit the particular needs and characteristics of customers in different geographic areas. This type of structure can be most appropriate for organizations that have similar branch facilities located in widely dispersed areas. A divisional structure by geographic area allows local participation in decision making and improved coordination with the region. Product or service. The divisional structure by product or service is most effective for implementing strategies when specific products or services need special emphasis. This type of structure is widely used when an organization offers only a few products or services, when an organization's products or services differ substantially. The divisional structure allows strict control over and attention to product lines, but it may also require a more skilled management force and reduce top management control. Customer. Divisional structure by customer can be the most effective way to implement strategies when a few major customers are of paramount importance and many different services are provided to these customers. This structure allows an organization to cater effectively to the requirements of the clearly defined customer groups. For example, a software company designs packages around customer groups depending on whether they are corporates, students, one-time users, etc. Process. A divisional structure by process is similar to a functional structure because activities are organized according to the way work is actually performed. However, a key difference between these two designs is that functional departments are not accountable for profits or revenues, whereas divisional process departments are evaluated on these criteria. Advantages. Managers and employees can judge their performances as structure is based on extensive delegation of authority. Employee morale is generally higher in a divisional structure than it is in the centralized one. Creates career development opportunities for managers. Leads to a competitive climate within an organization. Allows new businesses and products to be added easily. Disadvantages. Each division requires functional specialists who must be paid well. There exists some duplication of staff services, facilities, and personnel. Managers must be well qualified because the divisional design forces delegation of authority, better qualified individuals, requires higher salaries, etc. A divisional structure can also be costly because it requires an elaborate, headquarters-driven control system. Strategic Business Unit (SBU) structure. As the number, size, and diversity of divisions in an organization increase, controlling and evaluating divisional operations become increasingly difficult for strategists. The span of control becomes too large at top levels of the firm. In these instances, the SBU structure is the most appropriate. Also, in multi-divisional organizations, an SBU structure can greatly facilitate strategy implementation efforts. The SBU structure is composed of operating units where each unit represents a separate business to which the top corporate officer delegates responsibility for day-to-day operations and business unit strategy to its managers. The SBU structure groups similar divisions into strategic business units and delegates authority and responsibility for each unit to a senior executive who reports directly to the chief executive officer. A strategic business unit structure consists of at least 3 levels, with a corporate headquarters at the top, SBU groups at the second level, and divisions grouped by relatedness within each SBU at the third. Two disadvantages of an SBU structure are that it requires an additional layer of management which increases the salary expenses, and the role of the group vice president is often ambiguous. However, these limitations often do not outweigh the advantages of unproved coordination and accountability. Matrix structure. The matrix structure, in contrast, may be very appropriate when organizations conclude that neither the functional nor the divisional forms, even when combined with horizontal linking mechanisms like strategic business units, are right for their situations. In matrix structures, functional and product forms are combined simultaneously at the same level of organization. Employees have two superiors, a product or a project manager and a functional manager. The home department, that is engineering, manufacturing or sales, is usually functional and is reasonably permanent. People from these functional units are often assigned temporarily to one or more product units or projects. The matrix structure was developed to combine the stability of the functional structure with the flexibility of the product form. The matrix structure is very useful when the external environment, especially its technological and market aspects, is very complex and changeable. It does, however, produce conflicts revolving around duties, authority, and resource allocation. The matrix structure is often found in an organization or within an SBU when the following three conditions exist. Ideas need to be cross-fertilized across projects or products. Resources are scarce. And abilities to process information and to make decisions need to be improved. For development of the matrix structure, Davis and Lawrence have proposed three distinct phases. Cross-functional task forces. Temporary cross-functional task forces are initially used when a new product line is being introduced. A project manager is in charge as the key horizontal link. Product or brand management. If the cross-functional task forces become more permanent, the project manager becomes a product or brand manager and a second phase begins. In this arrangement, function is still the primary organizational structure, but the product or brand manager acts as the integrators of semi-permanent products or brands. Mature matrix. The third and the final phase of the matrix development involves a true dual authority structure. Both the functional and product structures are permanent. All employees are connected to both a vertical functional superior and a horizontal product manager. Functional and product managers have equal authority and must work well together to resolve disagreements over resources and priorities. Network structure. Another modern organizational structure is network structure. The network structure is an example of what could be termed a non-structure by its virtual elimination of in-house business functions. Business giants risk becoming too clumsy to proact, such as act and react efficiently. The network organizations contract out any business function that can be done better or more cheaply. In essence, managers in network structures spend most of their time coordinating and controlling external relations, usually by electronic means. For example, an apparel company outsources its manufacturing to the network of suppliers. Not owning any factories, the apparel company can be more flexible than many other retailers in lowering its costs, which aligns with its low-cost strategy. The potential management opportunities offered by recent advances in complex networks theory have been demonstrated, including applications to product design and development and innovation problem in markets and industries. Advantages of network structure. The network organization structure provides an organization with increased flexibility and adaptability to cope with rapid technological change and shifting patterns of international trade and competition. It allows a company to concentrate on its distinctive competencies while gathering efficiencies from other firms who are concentrating their efforts in their areas of expertise. The disadvantages are: contracting out functions to separate suppliers or distributors may keep the firm from discovering any synergies by combining activities. If a particular firm overspecializes on only few functions, it runs the risk of choosing the wrong functions and thus becoming non-competitive. Hourglass structure. Hourglass organization structure consists of 3 layers with constricted middle layer. The structure has a short and narrow middle level management. The role played by the middle management is diminishing as the tasks performed by them are increasingly being replaced by the technological tools. Information technology links the top and bottom levels in the organization, taking away many tasks that are performed by the middle level managers. Contrary to the traditional middle level managers who are often specialists, the managers in the hourglass structure are generalists and perform a wide variety of tasks. They would be handling cross-functional issues emanating such as those from marketing, finance, or production. strategic business units, and core competence. In modern times, most corporations organize their businesses into appropriate SBUs. And in their internal appraisal, they carry out an assessment of their SBUs. The concept is relevant to multi-product, multi-business enterprises. It is impractical for an enterprise with a multitude of businesses to provide separate strategic planning treatment to each one of its products or businesses. It is better to group the products or businesses into a manageable number of strategically related business units and then take them up for strategic planning. It recognizes that just because a firm is structured into a number of territorial units, say 6, it is not necessarily in 6 different businesses. It may be engaged in more or less of them. The endeavor should be to group businesses into an appropriate number of SBUs before the firm takes up strategy formulation task. The principle underlying the grouping is that all related products, related from the standpoint of function, should fall under one SBU. In other words, the SBU concept helps a multi-business corporation in scientifically grouping its businesses into a few distinct business units. The attributes of an SBU and the benefits a firm may derive by using the SBU idea are: it is a scientific method of grouping the businesses of a multi-business corporation which helps the firm in strategic planning. Strategic planning of SBU is independent from that of the whole firm. It is an improvement over the territorial grouping of businesses and strategic planning based on territorial units. An SBU is a grouping of related businesses that can be taken up for strategic planning distinct from the rest of the businesses. Unrelated functions are made into different SBUs. It helps in planning and allocation of resources to varied businesses. The SBU has a manager who has the responsibility for strategic planning and profit performance and who has control of profit influencing factors. The SBU has a manager who has responsibility for strategic planning and profit performance and who has control of profit influencing factors. Each SBU has its distinct set of competitors. It is a single business or a collection of related businesses which offers scope for independent planning and which might feasibly stand alone from the rest of the organization, has its own set of competitors, has a manager who has the responsibility of planning and profit performance. Value chain analysis. Value chain analysis has been widely used as a means of describing the activities within and around an organization and relating them to an assessment of the competitive strength of an organization or its ability to provide value for money, products, or services. Value chain analysis was originally introduced as an accounting analysis to shed light on the value added of separate steps in complex manufacturing processes in order to determine where cost improvements could be made and/or value creation could be improved. The primary activities of the organization are grouped into 5 main areas. Inbound logistics are the activities concerned with receiving, storing, and distributing the inputs to the product or service. This includes materials handling, stock control, transportation, etc. Operations transform these various inputs into the final product or service. It consists of machining, packaging, assembly, testing, etc. Outbound logistics collect, store, and distribute the product to customers. In case of tangible products, this would be warehousing, materials handling, transportation, etc. In case of services, it may be more concerned with the arrangements of bringing customers to the service if it is a fixed location, for example, sports events. Marketing and sales make consumers or users aware of the product or service. This includes sales administration, advertising, selling, etc. In public services, communication networks which help users access a particular service are often important. Services are all those activities which enhance or maintain the value of a product or service, such as installation, repair, training, and spares. Each of these groups of primary activities are linked to support activities. Support activities can be divided into 4. Procurement. This refers to the processes for acquiring the various resource inputs to the primary activities, not to the resources themselves. As such, it occurs in many parts of the organization. Technology development. All value activities have a technology, even if it is simply know-how. The key technologies may be concerned directly with the product, example R&D product design, or with processes, example process development, or with a particular resource, for example raw materials improvements. Human resource management. This is a particularly important area which transcends all primary activities. It is concerned with those activities involved in recruiting, managing, training, developing, and rewarding people within the organization. Infrastructure. The systems of planning, finance, quality control, information management, etc. are crucially important to an organization's performance in its primary activities. Infrastructure also consists of the structures and routines of the organization which sustain its culture. Identifying core competences. Competencies which critically underpin the organization's competitive advantage are known as core competences. Core competences differ from one organization to another depending on how the company is positioned and the strategies it is pursuing. In deciding which competences are core, this is another criterion which should be used: the ability to exploit the competence in more than one arena or market. The development of added value services and/or geographical spread of markets are two typical ways in which core competences can be exploited to maintain progress once traditional markets are mature or saturated. It is important to identify an organization's core competences, not only for reasons of ensuring or continuing good fit between these core competences and the changing nature of the market or environment. Value chain analysis is a reminder that the long-term competitive position of an organization is concerned with its ability to sustain value for money products or services, and it can be helpful in identifying those activities which represent the core competences of the organization. However, in order to do this, it is necessary to identify the basis on which an organization has gained competitive advantage and hence which are the core competences in sustaining this advantage. Managing linkages. Core competences in separate activities may provide competitive advantage for an organization, but nevertheless, over time they may be imitated by competitors. Core competences are likely to be more robust and difficult to imitate if they relate to the management of linkages within the organization's value chain and linkages into the supply and distribution chains. Management of internal linkages in the value chain could create competitive advantages in a number of ways. There may be important linkages between the primary activities. For example, strategizing how to maintain the stock of inputs or finished products will have its impact on one of the primary activities of the firm. Analysis needs to be done to ensure that costs are kept at a minimum while ensuring product or service is of good quality. It is easy to miss this issue of managing linkages between primary activities if in an analysis, for example, operations might be doing exceptionally well in producing low-cost, high-quality products, and service function 2 might be providing speedy solutions to the customer grievances. However, analyzing them together is essential to enhance the efficiency. High levels of competence in separate activities are not enough. The management of the linkages between a primary activity and a support activity may be the basis of a core competence. Hiring highly skilled people might help in increasing the effectiveness and efficiency of the whole firm. Linkages between different support activities may also be the basis of core competences. For example, the extent to which human resource development is in tune with new technologies has been a key feature in the implementation of new production and office technologies. In addition to the management of the internal linkage, competitive advantage may also be gained by the ability to complement or coordinate the organization's own activities with those of suppliers, channels, or customers. This could occur in a number of different ways. Vertical integration attempts to improve performance through ownership of more parts of the value system, making more linkages internal to the organization. However, the practical difficulties and costs of coordinating a wider range of internal activities can outweigh the theoretical benefits. Within manufacturing companies, the competence in closely specifying requirements and controlling the performance of the suppliers, sometimes linked to quality checking and/or penalties for poor performance, can be critical to both quality enhancement and cost reduction. A more recent philosophy has been total quality management, which seeks to improve performance through closer working relationships between the specialists within a value system. For example, many manufacturers will now involve their suppliers and distributors at the design stage of the product or project. Leadership and strategic implementation. A strategy manager has many different leadership roles to play: visionary, chief entrepreneur, and strategist and chief administrator. For the most part, managers have 5 leadership roles to play in pushing for good strategy execution. First, staying on top of what is happening, closely monitoring progress, ferreting out issues, and learning what obstacles lie in the path of good execution. Second, promoting a culture and esprit de corps that mobilizes and energizes organizational members to execute strategy in a competent fashion and perform at a high level. Third, keeping the organization responsive to changing conditions, alert for new opportunities, bubbling with innovative ideas, and ahead of rivals in developing competitively valuable competencies and capabilities. Fourth, exercising ethics leadership and insisting that the company conduct its affairs like a model corporate citizen. And lastly, pushing corrective actions to improve strategy execution and overall strategic performance. Leadership role in implementation. In today's competitive landscape, strategic leaders are challenged to adapt their frames of reference so that they can deal with rapid, complex changes. A managerial frame of reference is the set of assumptions, premises, and accepted wisdom that bounds a manager's understanding of the company, the industry in which it competes, and the core competencies that it exploits in the pursuit of strategic competitiveness and above-average returns. In other words, a manager's frame of reference is the foundation on which a manager's mindset is built. The strategic leader has several responsibilities, including the following: effectively managing the company's operations, sustaining high performance over time, being willing to make candid, courageous yet pragmatic decisions, seeking feedback through face-to-face communications, having decision-making responsibilities that cannot be delegated. Transformational and transactional leadership style. Transformational leadership style use charisma and enthusiasm to inspire people to exert them for the good of the organization. This style may be appropriate in turbulent environments, in industries at the very start or at the end of their life cycles, in poorly performing organizations when there is a need to inspire a company to embrace major changes. Transformational leaders offer excitement, vision, intellectual stimulation, and personal satisfaction. Transactional leadership style focus more on designing systems and controlling the organization's activities and are more likely to be associated with improving the current situation. Transactional leaders try to build on the existing culture and enhance current practices. Strategic change. The changes in the environmental forces often require businesses to make modifications in their existing strategies and bring out new strategies. Strategic change is a complex process, and it involves a corporate strategy focused on new markets, products, services, and new ways of doing businesses. For initiating strategic change, 3 steps can be identified. Recognize the need for change. The first step is to go for the environmental scanning involving appraisal of both internal and external capabilities, maybe through SWOT analysis, and then determine where the lacuna lies and scope for change exists. Create a shared vision to manage change. Objectives and vision of both individuals and organizations should coincide. There should be no conflict between them. Senior managers need to constantly and consistently communicate the vision, not only to inform, but also to overcome resistance through proper communication. Institutionalize the change. This is basically an action stage which requires implementation of change strategy. Creating and sustaining a different attitude towards change is essential to ensure that the firm does not slip back into old ways of thinking or doing things. Besides, Change process must be regularly monitored and reviewed to analyze the after effects of change. Kurt Lewin change process. To make the change lasting, Kurt Lewin proposed 3 phases of the change process for moving the organization from the present to the future. These stages are: unfreezing the situation. The process of unfreezing simply makes the individuals or organizations aware of the necessity for change and prepares them for such a change. Lewin proposes that the changes should not come as a surprise to the members of the organization. Sudden and unannounced change would be socially destructive and morale lowering. The management must pave the way for the change by first unfreezing the situation so that members would be willing and ready to accept the change. Unfreezing is the process of breaking down the old attitudes and behaviors, customs and traditions so that they start with a clean slate. This can be achieved by making announcements, holding meetings, and promoting the ideas throughout the organization. Changing to new situation. Once the unfreezing process has been completed and the members of the organization recognize the need for change and have been fully prepared to accept such change, their behavior patterns need to be redefined. H.C. Kellman has proposed 3 methods for reassigning new patterns of behavior. These are compliance, identification, and internalization. Compliance. It is achieved by strictly enforcing the reward and punishment strategy for good or bad behavior. Fear of punishment, or actual reward seems to change behavior for the better. Identification. Identification occurs when members are psychologically impressed upon to identify themselves with some given role models whose behavior they would like to adopt and try to become like them. Internalization. Internalization involves some internal changing of the individual's thought processes in order to adjust to a new environment. They are given freedom to learn and adopt new behavior in order to succeed in the new set of circumstances. Refreezing. Refreezing occurs when the new behavior becomes a normal way of life. The new behavior must replace the former behavior completely for successful and permanent change to take place. In order for the new behavior to become permanent, it must be continuously reinforced so that this new acquired behavior does not diminish or extinguish. Change process is not a one-time application but a continuous process due to dynamism and ever-changing environment. Strategic control. Control is one of the important functions of management. The task of control is intended to enable the organization to continuously learn from its experience and to improve its capability to cope with the demands of organizational growth and development. Control is intended to regulate and check, that is, to structure and condition the behavior of events and people, to place restraints and curbs on undesirable tendencies, to make people conform to certain norms and standards, to measure progress to keep the system on track. Within any control system, the following elements are identifiable: objectives and characteristics of the system, which could be operationalized into measurable and controllable standards, a mechanism for monitoring and measuring the characteristics of the system, a mechanism for comparing the actual results with reference to the standards, and for detecting deviations from standards, and for learning few insights on standards themselves. A mechanism for feeding back corrective and adaptive information and instruction into the system for effecting the desired changes to set right the system and to keep it on course. Primarily, there are 3 types of organizational control. Operational control. The thrust of operational control is on individual tasks or transactions as against total or more aggregative management functions. Many of the control systems in organizations are operational and mechanistic in nature. A set of standards, plans, and instructions are formulated. The control activity consists of regulating the processes within certain tolerances, irrespective of the effects of external conditions on the formulated standards, plans, and instructions. Some of the examples of operation controls can be stock control, managing stocks between set limits, production control, manufacturing to set programs, quality control, keeping product quality between agreed limits, cost control, maintaining expenditure as per standards, and budgetary control, keeping performance to the budget. Management control. When compared with operational, management control is more inclusive and more aggregative, in the sense of embracing the integrated activities of a complete department, division, or even the entire organization, instead or mere narrowly circumscribed activities of subunits. Strategic control. Strategic control ensures that, number 1, the strategy is being implemented as planned, and number 2, the results produced by strategy are those intended. Now we will discuss strategic control in detail. Types of strategic control. There are 4 types of strategic control. Premise control. A strategy is formed on the basis of certain premises about the complex organizational environment. Over a period of time, these premises may not remain valid. Premise control is a tool for systematic and continuous monitoring of the environment to verify the validity and accuracy of the premises on which the strategy has been built. It primarily involves monitoring 2 types of factors: environmental factors such as economic, inflation, liquidity, interest rates, etc., technology, social, and regulatory. Number 2, industry factors such as competitors, suppliers, substitutes, etc. It is neither feasible nor desirable to control all types of premises in the same manner. Different premises may require different amounts of control. Thus, managers are required to select those premises that are likely to change and would severely impact the functioning of the organization and its strategy. Strategic surveillance. Contrary to the premise control, strategic surveillance is unfocused. It involves general monitoring of the various sources of information to uncover unanticipated information having a bearing on the organization's strategy. It involves casual environmental browsing, reading financial and other newspapers, business magazines, meetings, conferences, discussions at clubs or parties, and so on can help you in strategic surveillance. Strategic surveillance may be a loose form of strategic control but is capable of uncovering information relevant to the strategy. Special alert control. Many unexpected events may force organizations to reconsider their strategy. Sudden changes in the government, natural calamities, terrorist attacks, unexpected mergers and acquisitions by competitors, industrial disasters, and other such events may trigger an immediate and intense review of strategy. Organizations cope up with these eventualities by forming crisis management. Implementation control. Implementation control is directed towards assessing the need for changes in the overall strategy in the light of unfolding events and results associated with incremental steps and actions. Strategic implementation control is not a replacement to operational control. Strategic implementation control, unlike operational controls, continuously monitors the basic direction of the strategy. The 2 basic forms of implementation control are monitoring strategic thrusts. It helps managers to determine whether the overall strategy is progressing as desired or whether there is need for readjustments. Milestone reviews. All key activities necessary to implement strategy are segregated in terms of time, events, or major resource allocation. It normally involves a complete reassessment of the strategy. It also assesses the need to continue or refocus the direction of an organization. Kindly have a look at the diagram to have an understanding of the different types of strategic control and when they are in action. Building a strategy-supportive corporate culture. Corporate culture refers to the company's values, beliefs, business principles, traditions, ways of operating, and internal work environment. An organization's culture is either an important contributor or an obstacle to successful strategy execution. The beliefs, vision, objectives, and approaches and practices underpinning a company's strategy may be compatible with its culture or they may not be. When they are compatible, the culture becomes a valuable ally in strategy implementation and execution. When the culture is in conflict with some aspect of company's direction, performance targets, or strategy, the culture becomes a stumbling block that impedes successful strategy implementation and execution. The perils of strategy culture conflict. When a company's culture is out of sync with what is needed for strategic success, the culture has to be changed as rapidly as can be managed. While correcting a strategy culture conflict can occasionally mean revamping strategy to produce cultural fit, more usually it means revamping the mismatched cultural features to produce a strategy fit. A prolonged strategy culture conflict weakens and may even defeat managerial efforts to make the strategy work. Creating a strong fit between strategy and culture. It is the strategy maker's responsibility to select a strategy compatible with the sacred or unchangeable parts of the prevailing corporate structure. It is the implementer's task, once the strategy is chosen, to change whatever facets of the culture hinder effective execution. Once a culture is executed, it is difficult to change. Changing a problem culture. Changing problem cultures is very difficult because of the heavy anchor of deeply held values and habits. People cling emotionally to the old and familiar. It takes concerted management action over a period of time to replace an unhealthy culture with a healthy culture, or to root out certain unwanted cultural obstacles and instill the ones that are more strategy supportive.